Hey there, it's Rachel from All About the House. In this video I'm going to show you how I add my watermark overlay to my product images. So you'll notice on my stickers I have this copyright image that appears. I go copyright, my shop name and my website URL. So the reason I add this to my images is to prevent copying and people from just stealing my printables without actually paying for them. You can also do these with products that are photos of actual printed products. So for example, like this one here, you could add a watermark down the bottom if you wanted to. So I'm just going to show you how I do this in Photoshop real quick. So open up Photoshop, locate the file on your computer. We'll start with these printed ones. Left click and drag to drop it into Photoshop, and then it will open it up for you. So you can also edit the photo if you wanted to, like touching up the white background, etc., but I'll save that for another video. So let's just add our watermark. So come over to the text tool, left click, and then start typing. So I typically go copyright, my shop name. I'm going to press CTRL A so I can actually enlarge that. So let's bump it up to say 30, let's go even 40, no, 40. Yep, 40. And then we'll make it black so it stands out against this background. Now if you do want to get the actual copyright symbol, what I do is get up Microsoft Word, type bracket C, close bracket space, and it will automatically enclose in a circle, and then I cut and paste that into Photoshop. So if you do want to get the actual copyright symbol instead of just brackets, that's how I do it. You can also go onto Google and just type in the copyright symbol, copy, and then paste it into Photoshop. So then I put my name, so copyright All About the House, and then www.allaboutthehouseeprintablesblog.com or whatever URL you want to put. And then I always leave a bit of a space between my words and my URL. Spelling error, make sure you always check the spelling errors. And then I like to align this to the center of my image. So I click on the marquee tool, left click and drag, so I've got this dash border appearing on the left and the right, and then I center it. Now I don't use this font for my overlays typically. It is a good font and it's nice and bold, so you could use that one. I actually use a different font which has a mixture of uppercase and lowercase, because this font that I've used, which is called Gill Sans, only comes in uppercase. I'm going to change it to the one that I do actually use, which is called Century Gothic. And then you can click this button here and it will reduce it back to lowercase and uppercase text. So to find that button, I just went to the characters menu. You can go window, character, and it's this little A symbol here. And then if you want it all uppercase, just press that button. If you want it lowercase and uppercase, so sentence case, you would just press it again to turn it off. Cool, so that's one way to add a overlay. If you don't want it to be as bold against the background, you can change the opacity. So just come up here and then type in a lower percentage. So now we've sort of made it a dark gray. You could drop it back even more so it's more like 50. If you want it to be even more of a watermark, so if you had this against a colored background, because this is currently against it is white, even though my photo is pretty shit and it doesn't look white, you could put it over the top of this, and see how it's hard to see. You would then change the text color to white. Color code for white is 255 for each of the RGB codes, and hit OK. And then I would typically bump it up to say 80, and then we can see it a bit better, or you could put it down the bottom as well. White works really good against a colored background, and dark colors work better against a lighter background, so obviously opposite. Cool, so that's one way that I do it. And then for my other ones, so for my actual product images like these Build You stickers, so I'm just going to close out of that one for now. I don't need that one anymore. Let's hit no and find this other one, left click and drag on the file to bring it into Photoshop. I'm using JPEG files, by the way, and then I just type straight over the top. So I go copyright All About the House, and then I go a new line. Make sure when you're doing a new line that you just hit enter straight after the last letter. If you do a space and then enter, it's not actually going to be centered. So make sure you go backspace and then press enter. And then your URL, so you could put your Etsy shop or whatever your online store is, your blog, etc. And then I've just pressed Control A to highlight all of that text, and I'm going to drop that back to say 20. You can make it centered using this button here. I like to have it centered, it just looks neater than, that looks a bit weird to me, so I like to keep it centered. And then I obviously use that Century Gothic font, and then black, but we can change the opacity up the top here. Let's drop it back to say 50. That looks pretty good. And then I like to angle it. So for anything that is portrait, I typically angle it. If it is landscape, I will do straight text like this, like I did in the other one just before. So to angle your text, just press Control T on your keyboard, and then you can choose this angle tool here. So for a watermark, I typically do no more than plus or minus 5 degrees. So if you want it to lean that way, you would go positive 5. If you want it to go the other way, which is the way that I always choose, I always go minus 5 and hit enter. The reason I recommend minus 5 is because it is still on a bit of an angle, but it's enough that you can still read it without having to like actually turn your head and read it. And it's also enough that it will cover multiple colors. So on my template, I like to have it covering, say, 3 colors. So if someone did print this out and try to use it without paying for it, they're not going to be able to get every color on my sticker sheet. So you'll notice the way I strategically place this is that I have the watermark appearing. For example, they can get the line of purple, but they can't get a whole row of any of the other colors without something intersecting. That one they nearly can. So I like to just make sure it's well covered, but enough that they can still see enough of a preview. So they can see what they look like without a watermark on for these ones, but everything else, you know, they can't steal my image without paying for it. I'm a big believer that you should pay for what you try and download. I'm not into people trying to get free stuff. It's totally uncool, so that's why I always watermark my images. It's your hard work, don't let people steal it. Alright, so we've got one overlay done. Let's create a copy. So press Control J on your keyboard with that layer selected, and then just left click with your mouse and move it down. So I typically go one to the right and then one to the left, press Control J again, and then move that one to the right. So then you're sort of going like that, or you could go the other way. And that just makes it so it's not so boring and straight. You could do it straight if you wanted to. For this one, I did a smaller overlay and I did more of them. I ended up changing it so that it was only about 3. Like for example, this one only has 3 on it. It's really up to you how much you want to put on there. I know it has 5, I put 1 on each. And then you can obviously change the text as well, so you could turn it on bold or turn it off bold. You could do italics again if you wanted to. You could also have your overlay straight on if you wanted. If you wanted it to be more see-through, so you saw less of the text, you would just change the opacity. So basically, to make a watermark overlay, it's just changing the opacity and angling the text. So you can change all of these at once by clicking on the top one, holding down Shift, so you'll have all of your layers highlighted, and then you can drop that back to say 20. I like to have it so that it is enough that it's not distracting, so they can still see the product, but they can also read what it says as well. So if I pin this to Pinterest, then they can know where to find the product and people can't steal it. There have been so many cases of people stealing other people's photos, product photos, literally everything. People these days are so like greedy, they'll just take anything and try and claim it as their own. It's really disgusting. So make sure that you put your watermark on it so people cannot do that. It really does make me quite mad when people steal other people's stuff. Make sure you watermark your photos so people cannot do that to you. So that's how I do my watermark overlays. I hope you found this video helpful. Remember that the key is to just put it in Photoshop, type your text, and change the opacity. And then you can just go File, Save As, save it as a JPEG, and you're good to go.